seriously popular.
Hello and welcome to Apocalypse Now, Dispatches from a World on the Brink, the Daily Mail's weekly global news podcast. I'm David Patrikarakos, and I've spent the last 15 years covering foreign affairs and conflict in some of the world's most dangerous places. But even I have to ask, are we now staring into the abyss?
Mr. Sinwar deserved to die 17 times, not once. But that's not the point, is it?
We expect that sooner or later Hamas is going to launch a new war, and the most important reason is that we shouldn't forget who started this war and why they started it.
For Mr. Netanyahu, given his extreme right-wing coalition, this is all about saving his political career. There's no question about it.
They have been doing these savage videos and savage methods to intimidate the Gazans, or shooting them in their knees because they dare to steal some of the humanitarian aid that was actually meant for those people.
Because here's a guy who said, I can fight terrorism. Well, you failed. Here's a guy who said, I get along with the US, with Russia and China. No, you don't. Here's a guy who said, I can change the Middle East irrespective of the Palestinians. In fact, while ignoring the Palestinians. No, you can't. And so the one thing that he will always be remembered for by contemporaries, but also by history, is October 7th. And he knows that.
Like to see right now is Gaza being rebuilt with a moderate leadership that prioritizes the Palestinian needs, not to focus or be obsessed with destroying Israel or with the armed resistance narrative.
You cannot prosecute a war based only on vengeance, however justified the sentiment for revenge, the yearning for justice is.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person, and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Lights, camera, innovation. Walt Disney Studios chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to transform the movie-making process. Together, we kept a remote production hub in Hawaii in sync with a team in California to bring Lilo and Stitch to theaters this summer. This is picture-perfect collaboration. This is Walt Disney Studios with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
Over 800 lawyers have now called on the UK government to use all available means to stop the fighting in Gaza, including reviewing trade ties with Israel and even imposing sanctions and travel bans on Israeli ministers. This, as Amnesty International issues a statement condemning Hamas for its brutal crackdown on peaceful protests in Gaza. And yet the bloody war machine rolls on both sides. Just yesterday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that Hamas's Gaza chief Mohammed Sinwar had been eliminated. Hamas, meanwhile, continues in its brutality not only towards its neighbour Israel, but its own people. Today will be an intense episode. The Israeli-Palestinian crisis is the most intractable of the last 80 years. It just never seems to end. Nothing is more emotive. Nothing is more tragic. But on this podcast, we seek to go beyond the headlines and indeed our emotions to analyse and to understand. Today, we have two guests, one who is Gazan, one who is Israeli, both of whom are patriots to their own side, but both of whom are furious with their own sides. Today on Apocalypse Now, we go behind the headlines to speak to a Gazan furious with the brutality, corruption, and savagery of Hamas, and an Israeli furious with Benjamin Netanyahu, who he sees as cynical, as brutal, and as prolonging a conflict for his own political survival. Let us speak to him first. Alon Pinkas, former Israeli ambassador, former consul general in New York, chief of staff to 4 foreign ministers, and columnist for The Independent. Alon, good morning. Alon, what are your thoughts on the latest developments out of Gaza? Benjamin Netanyahu has just announced the killing of Mohammed Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza. He has described him as being eliminated. Is this progress? Will it get us any closer to an end here?
No, of course not. But let's put it in perspective. Number one, when he announced it, it was already known to almost everyone and anyone for the better part of the last 2 weeks. Second, killing an individual doesn't change the course of a conflict. It's not a game changer. Even his more influential brother, Yahya Sinwar, who was targeted or assassinated 2-3 months ago. Third, and perhaps more importantly, Mr. Sinwar deserved to die 17 times, not once. But that's not the point, is it? The point is, what is the objective here? What is the end game? What is the exit strategy? What is the post-war scenario? And that, for the better part of the last 20 months, 601 days and counting today, Israel is deliberately clueless about and deliberately vague about and deliberately disruptive about. So this will not change anything in terms of what's ahead in the next few days or weeks, David.
Why do you say deliberately vague, deliberately clueless?
Because, well, there are 2 or 3 reasons. Let me somewhat delve into them without tiring our listeners and viewers. The first is that Mr. Netanyahu never took responsibility or was willing to be held accountable for the debacle and the calamity of October 7th, which was on his watch. This is a man who prided himself and boasted and bragged for years that he's Mr. Security, he's the protector of Israel, he's the genius who knows how to fight terrorism. Well, it all came down crashing on October 7th. So for him to prolong and perpetuate the war distances himself from that debacle. Also, given that in the meantime, the chief of staff resigned, the head of the Shin Bet, the equivalent of the British MI5, resigned. Well, Mr. Netanyahu tried to dismiss him, and it was a whole saga in the Supreme Court, but that's not the point now. He's gone. The chief of military intelligence resigned. The chief of the Southern Command, all major generals, resigned, as well as a whole cadre of brigadier generals and colonels. And only Mr. Netanyahu takes no responsibility. So the longer the war takes, the farther he gets from being ascribed responsibility, number one. Number two, during this 20-month period, he expanded the war into Lebanon, and on 2 occasions, in April and then in October 2024, he escalated it into Iran. I'm not saying it was entirely by design. I'm not saying it was entirely miscalculated, but it is what it is. He did escalate the war. But by late 2023 and early 2024, and this is where I move to another aspect or another possible explanation, David, he was presented with an American proposal, half-baked, yes, but nonetheless a proposal by the then Biden administration for a so-called post-war Gaza framework, which included an inter-Arab force that would come in and replace Hamas. I'm not saying it would have worked smoothly. I'm not saying it was planned to the, dotting the I's and crossing T's, but it was a plan. He dismissed and he derided it. He was then asked, okay, what do you have in mind? Because you can decimate and destroy and annihilate Gaza, but that's not going to solve anything because 2.3 million Palestinians still live there. And even if you destroy Hamas, who's going to control? And that's the political reason, David. Because for the better part of the last 10 years, he has been attempting successfully to strengthen Hamas in order to create a political divide between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, in order to prove that the Palestinian state is not only discontiguous, but impossible to implement, and to show that there is a disintegration between Gaza and the West Bank. And for him, Ending the war creates a reintegration, which would then lead to pressures from the Biden administration, but now also from the Trump administration. And if you listen to carefully to what Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Prime Minister Keir Starmer are saying from Britain too, as well as the European Union, as well as a joint Canadian-British-French communique, it would push him into not just the end of the war, but into some kind of a negotiated process with the Palestinians, something that A, he doesn't want, B, would very likely, not 100% certain, but very likely bring down his coalition. So you take all these factors, you take all these explanations, and you see why he's perpetuating the war. Even David, as we speak today, the new Steve Witkoff, the special American presidential envoy, even his new plan doesn't necessarily end the war. And so it's a partial plan. So there you have it.
I want to be really clear on this, Alon. You are telling me you believe Benjamin Netanyahu is prolonging this war, which means prolonging every day the deaths of more Gazans and, of course, the deaths and injured of all IDF Israeli soldiers. You are telling me he is prolonging this every day to save his political skin.
100%. There's no question about it. By the way, this is not me with some outlier or, dissenting view. This is the view in consistent polls of the majority of the Israeli public. I thought so from the very onset. Look, he came out with morally justified ideas about eradicating and obliterating and annihilating and choose your synonym, Hamas. Fine. It didn't work for 18 or 19 months. Why did it not work? May have to do with military tactics, may have to do with the fact that the military objectives are not aligned with political goals, which is an anathema to the idea and concept of modern warfare, in fact, since Machiavelli or since von Clausewitz at least. And it didn't work. Look, it took the Allies 9 months from Normandy in June 44 to the outskirts of Berlin, which they didn't enter because the Soviet Union entered. It took them 9 months. It's been 19 months. Israel, one of the strongest militaries in the world, one of the most technologically superior militaries in the world. It's fighting against a murderous, ragtag, savage terror organization, but nonetheless a terror organization in a small, densely populated, yes, swath of land. And for 19 now, it's been 20 months, has been unable to achieve something that would even remotely look like a decisive political victory. It's all military. And so for Mr. Netanyahu, given his extreme right-wing coalition, this is all about saving his political career. There's no question about it.
Well, let's talk about what happens after. Every day this war rolls on. Every Israeli that dies, every Palestinian that dies can be laid at his door. Also, you say, which many people say, that Netanyahu strengthened Hamas over previous years to bolster his own political standing. Surely the reckoning, the post-mortem, the inquiry that is going to come after all of this will be fatal politically to him.
Yeah, but it's a post-mortem of sorts, because it'll very likely come after the end of his political career, which again, according to those very same polls that I quoted on how people feel about why he's prolonging the war, in those very polls, when asked if if an election would take place, he is defeated in every single poll. I'm not saying that polls necessarily reflect what's going to happen in the polling stations, but he will lose the election. He's also, per your precise remark, he's also preventing the establishment of a national inquiry commission of what had happened, the policy that led to, and the military and intelligence failures of October 7, 2023, because he knows exactly what's going to happen. And in fact, I'll just add one more tidbit here. One of the main reasons that he went out and tried to fire and dismiss the head of the Shin Bet, Mr. Ronen Bar. Again, the Shin Bet is the General Security Service, the equivalent of the British MI5, is that the Shin Bet, the GSS, published and divulged parts of its own internal investigation of what had happened on October 7th, but of course they preceded it with the policies leading to October 7th, and it had some scathing remarks about the prime minister's policy there. So there's a reason why he's not investigating, and you're absolutely right. Once it is investigated, that would be his day of reckoning, and that would be the only thing. And this frightens the hell out of him. That would be the only thing that would be remembered. Because here's a guy who said, I can fight terrorism. Well, you failed. Here's a guy who said, I get along with the US, with Russia and China. No, you don't. Here's a guy who said, I can change the Middle East irrespective of the Palestinians. In fact, while ignoring the Palestinians. No, you can't. And so the one thing that he will always be remembered for by contemporaries, but also by history, is October 7th. And he knows that.
We think back, of course, to the Yom Kippur War, 1973, when Israel was again the victim of a surprise attack. At the end of that war, there was an inquiry, and it led to the downfall of Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir and indeed Minister of Defense Moshe Dayan. However, if you look into that, neither of them actually had to resign. They did so because they had some shame. I'd like to talk about the conduct of the war now. I want to sort of focus more on the military and strategic elements of all this. First of all, let's talk about some of the, what people call atrocities, what others call mistakes. There's criticism come this week. At least 3 Palestinians were killed and 46 wounded after the IDF opened fire on crowds who rushed to an aid point run by what is a controversial Gaza humanitarian found work. Is this indefensible, Alon?
Most Israelis would like to think that it's defensible, because they are still devastated, agonizing, and angered by what had happened on October 7th. But a vengeance, while a natural and human reaction, is not a political strategy. You cannot prosecute a war based only on vengeance, however justified the sentiment for revenge, the yearning for justice is. And if you look at how the war evolved from about November, December of 23, but particularly during the first half of 2024, and now you see it again in the first half of 2025, it is indefensible. It is indefensible because it is absolutely unjustifiable and inexplicable that over 52,000 people died, of which Palestinians, of which about 70%, may probably more, were non-combatants. Now, I'm not saying this was deliberate. A lot of these things were done as a result of mistakes, miscalculations, use, the liberal use of munitions that should not have been used. That could be explained with the vengeance factor. But again, I can see that and sort of defend that, David, in the first few months. 20 months later, it is indefensible. It is indefensible. On top of which, I go back to a remark I made previously in a different context of our conversation. On top of which, the war does not have political objectives. The war has no end game. The war has no attainable diplomatic goals. So why are you doing this? And so it's not defensible.
And we come back to this question of what is and isn't defensible, because in the end, Israel sits with this terror group on its border that year after year, decade after decade, fires rockets into its cities at civilian targets. No sovereign state, be it Israel, be it Britain, be it Fiji, can tolerate this. But you are dealing with a terror group that wears no uniforms, has no military bases, fires from amongst the population, from houses and hospitals. How do you fight a group like this?
You fight 2 ways. You target them constantly. You do not strengthen them the way Mr. Netanyahu did just to win political quiet in the West Bank by strengthening Hamas in Gaza and allowing and vetting and encouraging the funneling of funds into Gaza from Qatar and from elsewhere. You propose, you provide, you show goodwill and good intentions to reach some kind of a grand political deal. It's a different podcast. It's a different conversation. What deal is feasible, viable, and implementable? But you show good faith. When you do nothing on the Palestinians, yet you let Hamas grow and strengthen, then inevitably October 7th happens. With all due respect to the military failures and the intelligence debacle, it was almost bound to happen. Then you prosecute the war forcefully with a massive retaliation where necessary, but you keep a political idea, a political framework, and end game in mind, which is something that Israel didn't do. I have zero tolerance and zero empathy and zero sympathy for Hamas. There's no question about that. That does not justify the killing of over 40,000 non-combatants. How do you fight them? You offer them something, because you're going to have to offer them something, not because they're nice people, not because you like them, not because they've behaved properly, but because in this thin, narrow swath of land between the Jordan River in the east and the Mediterranean Sea, there are 14.5 million people divided equally between Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Jews. So it's not just Israel fighting Gaza and trying to annihilate Hamas, which we all say, okay, well, that's justifiable because like you said, no sovereign country would and should tolerate a terror organization. But this is a political reality. By strengthening Hamas, refusing to negotiate with the Palestinian Authority, ignoring what the Europeans have been saying for 45 years, ignoring what successive American administrations have been imploring Israel to do in the last 20 years, you're creating effectively and essentially a one-state reality. And then when the world is going to say, well, if you don't enfranchise them, this is apartheid, we say anti-Semitism. No, you can't win all these arguments. Hamas needs to be destroyed. Israel did what it had to do, but it's been 20 months. It does not make sense. It is irrational. It is impractical to assume that prolonging the war by 2 weeks or 2 months is going to achieve anything that hasn't been achieved until now.
In traditional warfare, you win by killing as many of your enemy soldiers as possible and forcing him to the negotiating table. Hamas can kill repulsively, horrifically, on October the 7th, civilians. It can kill IDF soldiers, but it can never kill as many Israelis as it needs to get Israel to surrender. So it does something else. It goads Israel into greater and greater violence. And with every Palestinian, every Gazan that is killed, Israel loses. But of course, with every Israeli that is killed, Israel loses. So Israel is damned both ways. So what I think we're both saying here is that in the end, there is no military solution here. Israel is damned either way. It has to find a political way out of this.
I think you're 100% right. I think this is exactly what this government lacked for the last decade, and certainly since the war began, and more specifically and pointedly when the Americans made their ideas, by the way, supported by the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis, who all said, we will go in, money's not the issue, but we need a guarantee from Israel that it would pull out and that there could be some kind of a meaningful negotiations. Now, when in response to what's going on in Gaza, an extreme right-wing government announces that it is going to build 22 new settlements in the West Bank, which are not going to be built, by the way, but nonetheless, they announce it with much fanfare. You then call a random Palestinian and don't be surprised when he says he has no hopes. So he now supports Hamas. Yes, Hamas wreaked havoc on his life. Yes, Hamas brought death to everyone and anyone he knows. But no, there's no point unless there is some kind of a political silver lining, some kind of a political horizon. This is what Israel can and should have provided them with and failed to do.
Thank you, Alon. This is Apocalypse Now. We'll return after the break with Hamza Hawidi, a Palestinian human rights activist.
5 immersive worlds, 1 amazing theme park. Get ready to explore the all-new Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, Super Nintendo World, How to Train Your Dragon, Isle of Berk, and Dark Universe. Epic Universe, now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Our universe will never be the same. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
Grandpa's here!
Hank's always helping out. Grandpa style.
Now he's treating his prostate cancer with help from Xtandi and enzalutamide. Xtandi 40 milligram tablets treats men with prostate cancer that has spread to other parts of the body and responds to a medical or surgical treatment to lower testosterone. Xtandi may cause serious side effects: seizure, a brain condition called PRES, allergic reactions, heart disease that can lead to death, falls and bone fractures, swallowing problems, or choking that can lead to death. Stop Xtandi and get medical help at once if your face, tongue, lip, or throat start swelling. Tell your doctor at once if you faint, have a seizure, quickly worsening headache, decreased alertness, confusion, vision problems, chest pain or discomfort, or shortness of breath. Xtandi can cause harm to an unborn baby or miscarriage. Use birth control during and 3 months after Xtandi. Common side effects include muscle and joint pain, feeling unusually tired, hot flashes, constipation, less appetite, diarrhea, high blood pressure, bleeding, falls, fractures, and headache. Talk to your doctor and visit Xtandi.com.
Welcome back to Apocalypse Now, dispatches from a world on the brink. We're still talking about Gaza, and joining me now is Hamza Hawidi, a Palestinian human rights activist. Hamza, thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts on the latest developments out of Gaza? Benjamin Netanyahu has just announced the killing of Mohammed Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, describing him as being eliminated. Will this get us any closer to an end of the conflict?
I would say that the better description for the current status in Gaza and the current war between Hamas and Israel can be described better as if we said it's a matter of a stalemate. It's the politics of a stalemate right now when it comes to Israel. Because on the one hand, as you said, Hamas is heavily destroyed right now. Most of their leadership were killed by Israel, and it's not Hamas that we knew before the war. Hamas that was sending thousands of rockets or having thousands of terrorists to invade Israel. Still, at the same time, Israel reached this situation of a stalemate that is not officially occupying Gaza, but at the same time, they are not allowing an alternative body to come and rule over Gaza. They did not win the war against Hamas. There are still hostages under Hamas's captivity, but at the same time, they did not also lose the war against Hamas. And unfortunately, since February 2024, at least, Israel announced that they are working on a plan for the day after the war in the Gaza Strip. But until now, there is no clear plan for that except for the Trump-Rivera plan, which is can be described only as a bluff that is not realistic, actually, and cannot be applied and shouldn't morally. All the stones stop at the decisions of the Israeli government. If they are willing to allow a new Palestinian body, for example, the Palestinian Authority, to come and rule over the Gaza Strip and to finish the job, or to allow joint government from some Arab forces or some Arab assistance to come and finish the job with Hamas, because at the end of the day, Hamas should be disarmed.
You say that Hamas should be disarmed. You are a Gazan. Tell me why you think Hamas should and must be disarmed.
Actually, I can't see any future for my society, at least the people in Gaza, that includes Hamas being disarmed, because from the first moments that Hamas took over the power of Gaza, they did not wait to show us their true face. They started from 2007 with fighting the Palestinian Authority or the Fatah people, killing them, throwing them from roofs, executing them, and training them with motorcycles. And for the extended period from 2007 and until we are right now in 2025, Hamas did not miss any opportunity during this time to ruin the lives of the people of Gaza, exploiting their suffering and actually weaponizing their suffering. They are now dealing with the suffering of the Palestinians or the human lives of the Palestinians as a tool, just a tool to pressure Israel to get more demands. And I think the people of Gaza are quite enough that we had too many military operations between Hamas and Israel, whether we are talking from 2006 until now, that ruin the lives of the Gazans. And even the term of consistency or the term of having a long-term future does not exist for the Gazans. This is what a typical Gazan would tell you when Hamas is included. We cannot build anything. We cannot have anything because we expect that sooner or later Hamas is going to launch a new war. And the most important reason is that we shouldn't forget who started this war and why they started it. And the most rude thing is that they say it out clearly, publicly, even after all what they did and the consequences of it, that they are saying it, that we are proud of what we did. We're going to do it again. So if Hamas was not disarmed, it's just only a matter of time until they use the donations and the money that comes into Gaza to rebuild themselves. And as their leader said publicly, Ghazi Hamadi said, we're going to repeat the atrocities of October the 7th.
You are a Gazan. You have lived under Hamas in Gaza. What is it like to live under Hamas in Gaza?
Actually, I not only that I had to live in Gaza and endure this unimaginable circumstances with living under Hamas, I also had the experience of being imprisoned by Hamas, and I was imprisoned by Hamas twice, simply for protesting against them and calling for a better future in Gaza. Our living under Hamas, I can tell you that we saw many versions of Hamas. I mean, the Hamas that started in 2006 when they took the government is a totally different Hamas from the one that was in 2023. They showed us different levels of radicalism, of extremism. I mean, I remember when Hamas's minister Fatih Ahmad, he was the interior minister, and he started imposing laws on what we wear. If you are hanging with a girl or something like that. So it was the ISIS-like rules that was imposed on the Gazans, not to mention the exploitation of our suffering, because Gaza was receiving hundreds of millions, if not more, of donations that at the end of the day reached out to the hands of Hamas, and the typical or ordinary Gazan did not see any sign of that.
Just yesterday, you tweeted about reports that Hamas has just shot at least 5 Gazans in the knees for the crime of being hungry. This is what Hamas calls order, you wrote. Kneecaps for the poor, bullets for the starving, executions for the desperate.
This is the unfortunate reality about Gaza. I mean, aside of the bombs and the siege that it has an endless cycle of Hamas's terrorism. I mean, they have been doing these savage videos and savage methods to intimidate the Gazans, of shooting them in their knees because they dared to steal some of the humanitarian aid that was actually meant for those people. We saw actually how Hamas responded to the anti-Hamas protests that started in Gaza even during the war. We saw how Hamas tortured Uday Nasser al-Rabi'i to death simply for protesting against them during the war and just saying, we want the war to stop, we want Hamas to be overthrown. This is becoming a typical Gazan demand. If you looked at all the polls that is coming out from Gaza, whether we are talking about the Palestinian Center for Policy and Research survey that is saying 65% of the Gazan society do not want Hamas in their future. Other polls shows a way larger scale of anti-Hamas Gazans. So we are living with those two different realities. The one is that the people of Gaza oppose Hamas, want to overthrow Hamas, but Hamas continues to show sadistic levels of savagery, barbarism against the people of Gaza, simply because those people are trying just to survive it during the war.
In traditional war, you win by killing as many enemy soldiers as you can and forcing your enemy to surrender. Hamas knows that it can kill Israeli civilians, kill Israeli soldiers, but never to the degree that Israel is forced to surrender. So it seems, Hamza, to do something different. It seems to provoke the Israelis constantly, so they kill more and more Gazans. That way they bring political condemnation down on Israel. Is Hamas, Hamza, as a Gazan who has lived under them, who has been imprisoned by them, is Hamas using its own people as fodder in its war against Israel?
Yes, actually, unfortunately, they have a terrifying level of rudeness that they are talking about such a rhetoric publicly and without even having any shame. If you looked at the speeches of Hamas's officials, whether we are talking even before the start of October the 7th until right now, they are talking about it proudly, that they are using the people as a bargaining chip, as a leverage tool against Israel. Yahya Sinwar said it out clearly that they are going to be used to isolate Israel from the international community. So apart that people are suffering right now, Hamas puts more suffering against those people. It doesn't matter for them what is your position from the war or where you are standing. You are just a tool that is being used to pressure Israel to exaggerate the suffering so they can get the support from the international community. That is not exempting Israel from its responsibilities when it comes to the war, but we should all understand that what Hamas is doing actually from the beginning of the war is just to try to exaggerate the suffering of the people of Gaza. I mean, Hamas had a previous experience when they kidnapped the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in 2006, and they saw how Israel responded to the kidnapping of one soldier. So they could have imagined what are the consequences of kidnapping more than 200 Israeli hostages, and they talked about it they talked about it publicly. Hamas's officials talked publicly that they expected the Israeli response, that they saw it was coming, but still they did what they did.
Just how widespread is dissatisfaction, even hatred of Hamas among the Palestinian people. We see the odd demonstration. Obviously, Hamas controls things so tightly that we can't interview people en masse in Gaza. Is Hamas now widely disliked or even loathed by most Gazans, or does it still retain popular support?
Actually, if that was the question before October the 7th, I would tell you that unfortunately the majority of the Gaza society were backing Hamas or supporting the idea of armed resistance that Hamas is defending them. But the thing about this war that makes it way different from the other wars apart from the mass suffering and the mass destruction is that the people of Gaza, the majority of the people of Gaza are now opposing Hamas. I mean, poll after poll are coming out of Gaza showing a mass opposition against Hamas. The least poll is talking about 65% of the Gaza society who don't want Hamas in the future. Other polls for the hour poll, for example, they showed that 80% of the Gaza society want an alternative for Hamas to rule over them for the future. Another poll from the hour that actually came out yesterday about the aid distribution showed that Hamas has 2% of trust among the Gaza society when it comes to distributing the humanitarian aid. But if you look, Israel has more support among the Gazans to distribute the humanitarian aid more than Hamas. That's how the people of Gaza are right now hating Hamas and opposing Hamas.
It does seem that Gazans are caught between an enraged Israel and a savage Hamas that uses them for its own ends. Is there any way out of this?
I think there is a way of out of this, but it still goes for those who have the power. Because as I said, yes, the people of Gaza are right now hating Hamas, but the idea is that we must provide them with the alternative. Otherwise, those people will go to back Hamas again if they were not provided with an alternative, or other militias might even erupt in the Gaza Strip. I mean, there was a history for an ISIS-linked militias in Gaza that disappeared, let's say, after 2013. Those militias might come up again and start having the support of the society. So the idea right now is to invest in this opposition to Hamas and give the Palestinians another Palestinian alternative that is moderate, that does not adopt jihadism, Islamism, that actually works for the benefit of those people. There is a way for that. If we allow the Palestinian Authority, with the assistance of the international community, to rule over Gaza for the day after. There is a lot to be criticized about the Palestinian Authority, but it is not something compared to Hamas. It's not something like Hamas. If the Palestinian Authority even was not the best candidate for such a thing, still there is a groups of the Palestinian civil society that can be backed by Arab governments or Arab forces to lead over the future of Gaza. Otherwise, if we are talking about plans for displacing the Palestinians to other countries or ruling over them with occupation, those are plans that is not going to work and will take us back to the same circle, to the same starting point that is actually ruining the lives of everyone in this conflict, Palestinians and Israelis.
How do you displace Hamas? Where is the alternative? Perhaps you said some kind of broader Arab rule, the Palestinian Authority, but the Israelis say they won't accept that. But how do you displace Hamas? Won't they just violently try to keep themselves in power with every tool that they have?
For sure, Hamas is going to try as much as they could, not only to stay in power, I would say, because I think that Hamas started to realize that they would never take the power of ruling Gaza again. I mean, every actor in this conflict is opposing such an idea. The Arab countries, the Western community, Israel, the Palestinian Authority, no one wants Hamas in this future. So they understand that well. But what they are trying to do is to avoid accountability, because they understand that whoever is the body who's going to come and rule over Gaza, those people will be held accountable for the mass atrocities that they did on October and the atrocities that they did to the Gazans during the war. So they are trying to avoid accountability. I'm not actually a military expert to tell you the exact step by step how to get rid of Hamas, but I would say that to get rid of Hamas, it's not the mission of the bombardment right now, because there is nothing actually to be bombarded in Gaza. Gaza is flattened right now, and that the Palestinian Authority, even itself, they say that we are willing to clash with Hamas to disarm them. They say that publicly. So I think they should have been given such an opportunity, because at the end of the day, yes, we want Hamas destroyed, but we should define what is a destruction of Hamas. For me, Hamas is right now destroyed with the most of the leadership killed, and some lower figures ruling whatever is left from Hamas. So I think that this is a sign of distraction that can be used to give an alternative the power to come and finish the job actually of disarming Hamas, because at the end of the day you can't go after each Hamas member and kill him.
As a Gazan, do you have anything to say to our listeners? Beyond obviously peace, what is it that you hope to see concretely over the next 5 years in Gaza and indeed in Israel?
What I'm dreaming of right now is just a better Gaza, because I think this would be the first step actually to address the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But what I would like to see right now is Gaza being rebuilt with a moderate leadership that prioritizes the Palestinian needs, not to focus or be obsessed with destroying Israel or with the armed resistance narrative. So this is for the short term, but on the long term, we should also understand that Gaza is not a country alone. I mean, Gaza is part of what is supposed to be the Palestinian state, and at the end of the day, Hamas or whatever militias, those are all products of this conflict. Those are all products of the general idea of this conflict, of being occupied, of being blockaded, X and Y and Z.
Hamza, thank you very much today. Let us hope that peace comes to both Israel and Gaza, and soon.
Hopefully.
Thank you to both my guests in what was an emotionally and politically fraught episode. Join me, David Patrikarakos, next time as we continue to bring you dispatches from a world on the brink. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, TikTok and Instagram at Apocalypse Now Pod, and you can get in touch via email at apocalypsenow@dailymail.com. We'll see you again next week as we ask once again, Apocalypse Now?